Hey guys, I got a question for you. How will AI change what we cook? Well, I figured who better to ask that question than two people that were there from pretty much the very beginning of Chef Watson, the first true culinary AI. Our guests this week were James Briscione and Lal Varshney, the creators of Culin AI, and we talk about where all this is going, how AI will show up in restaurants, how AI will help us create new recipes and help us cook better in the kitchen, how it may ultimately be this new agentic wellness coach for us, and all these different other aspects of AI in the food system. So it was a really fun conversation. So stay tuned.
This podcast is part of the Spoon Podcast Network, home of smart conversations that feed your mind.
And we are live. Hey, Sara Roversi, how are you?
Fine, thanks. I'm super excited about this new chat about my food, ethical implications, what's going to be the future of food with AI jumping into the scene.
Yeah, this is a topic that is on a lot of people's minds in the world of food and culinary. And I'm very excited to have with us today two folks that were there doing this a decade ago at IBM with Chef Watson, James Briscione and Lal Varshney. And we're going to bring them on in just a moment. I'm really excited just to have you with us for a bit, Sara, because I know you're busy, you have to run, but you won an award this last week. Congratulations on that. And then next month, we're going to be in Rome at the Vatican, talk about the ethical implications of AI in the food system. So I'm also very excited about those conversations.
Absolutely, yes. Also because, let's say, connecting the award to what we're going to do to the Vatican. I think that now we have this strong responsibility of keeping all the heritage and the heritage at risk and connecting them to the brand new technologies that are jumping in our life and transforming our interaction with food, but also with our ancestral knowledge. Of course, the award that I get in Delphi was related to preserving living heritages, culinary living heritages, and of course, how we can transfer this to the next generation and making sure that those living heritages are going to stick in our culture, in our communities, in our way of preserving the culinary creativity and so on. And now we are talking about that, and we are talking about how AI can help us also to keep all of that sticking and connected with our families, our traditions, moments of sharing this knowledge. So I'm super excited because also what we're going to do at the Vatican is going to be strictly related to that. And we all know that there are ethical implications, and we all know that talking about technology in the world of food is also connected to the most relevant issues that we as humanity were facing. As you know, also with the Coffee Now Foundation and the Commission on Global Food Security, we have been talking a lot about how AI can also help us to solve the most critical issues like global hunger that still is not even solved, is raising. And so thinking about how also AI can play a role in this game is absolutely fundamental.
Yeah, I feel like we're realizing that AI could help in a lot of different aspects across the food value chain. There's also like, it has to be a balanced approach. So we have to kind of talk it through and be thoughtful about it. And so with that in mind, I want to welcome on stage Lal Varshney and James Briscione, who will be with us. So Sara, thank you so much for saying hi, and we will see you in Rome in just about a month.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm going to follow this exciting conversation. Thank you so much, guys, for joining our Food AI collab.
So James and Lav, I just really quickly want to let people get to know you a little bit. So you guys are working on a new startup called Colon AI, and James, you have a great post you wrote about it on your Substack, and we'll make sure that people get that link in the comments here. But you guys go back about a decade. You guys have been working on this for a while, before a lot of people were thinking about how AI will change how we cook, before people knew about this thing called ChatGPT. So real quickly, how did you guys get to start working together a decade ago? What was that origin story?
I guess maybe I'll start the origin because we kind of approached James once we were into it a little bit. So I was at IBM Research, and IBM had just won on Jeopardy, and so there was this kind of call to all the researchers there to do something similarly spectacular, but in a new area. And at the time, creativity was something that hadn't been studied too much from a computational perspective. And so I wanted to do something in that area. And I was, sitting at home watching Food Network, and, it struck me that maybe we could win on Iron Chef rather than on Jeopardy. It didn't end up going that way because the growing interest was on how humans and AI can work together rather than out competing. And I think that's really the core of it these days as well, how AI can augment human capabilities. But that's how it got started. And then we started building up some algorithms, building up some data sets. It was a different world, 10 years ago without all these modern AI technologies. But then we went to James and the Institute of Culinary Education and got a lot of their inputs. And I'll let James talk about that.
Yeah. So,
James.
I mean, this, like we said, 10 years ago, before I even knew what AI was, it wasn't a term certainly in my lexicon.
You were running restaurants, you're competing on Iron Chef. Like
Yeah.
that was your world.
Yes. I just, recently left Restaurant Danielle and was now the director of culinary development at the Institute of Culinary Education in Manhattan. I think it was a couple of years after we'd wrapped, season 2 in the Champions Tournament of Chopped. Where I became the first ever two-time champion.
Yep.
Was doing all of those things, and yeah, I mean, just kind of again, I think Institute of Culinary Education, and they, Lav and his team, came to the school with this idea, and we're ready to kind of had really developed a very impressive system, and we're ready to kind of put a real world test to it and get the chef's perspective on it, and of course, my immediate thought was there's no way a computer could possibly know, cooking is so sensory. There's no way a computer could possibly know more about cooking and flavor combinations than me. I quickly realized that I was wrong about that, and the system that they had built was understanding flavor. I had no idea. It was a relatively new concept at the time that you could even really quantify flavor and turn it into a data set and use it for analysis and for creation. So this all was just immediately fascinating to me, and we kind of took those algorithms and the system they had built and really shaped it into a system that could that could generate recipes and was a very powerful tool to take into the kitchen.
Yeah.
And so go ahead, Lom.
Oh, I was just going to mention that after we kind of started building it, we did a cookbook and a food truck and a web app and all kinds of stuff. And then it was licensed to a lot of the big multinational food companies. And so a lot of products you buy in grocery stores, even to this day, were developed using the Chef Watson technology, whether it's spice mixes from McCormick or all kinds of other things. I think IBM likes to attribute it between $100 million and $1 billion of impact right in the first few years. So, it was pretty powerful. And we were pretty happy that we were able to not just develop the technology, but get it out into the world and make an impact.
Yeah, I think McCormick, I remember having the chief technology officer for McCormick come speak at our event, the Smart Kitchen Summit, because they had done that deal with you guys. And I think that was the first time I remember a big CPG brand partnering up with an AI company. That has to be a milestone. But nowadays it's becoming more common. We'll get into that. But I do want to talk and fast forward to today, because you guys got the band back together in a sense and decided to create this app called Culinary. What was it about today? What made sense for you guys to actually start working together again and create this new app?
Yeah, in a sense, the ChatGPT moment, brought AI back into public consciousness quite a bit. And I was actually serving in Washington at the time. I was serving at the White House, working on AI policy, helping the president write various executive orders and so on. And it was just kind of so forward in the public perception that, we wanted to see what we can do again using the modern tools, but really dig into the trust and the nutrition and other aspects, because, people were starting to use these chatbots to develop recipes, but, they read okay, but it's unclear whether when you cook them, whether they'll turn out, and not at all personalized, not at all approaching the nutritional requirements that people are looking for. So that was kind of the inspiration to get things back together. And of course, it was always very fun to work with James. So, there's always that.
Yeah, and we've of course stayed in touch through these years and always talked about things and shared interesting articles and things that found our interest, and I think we always, kind of hope that we would, find that moment. I think, just like Love said, this GPT, moment really, and I think we're at a very unique moment right now where it is driving adoption of AI, and it's making it feel very comfortable and approachable and not too scary. But I think we're kind of playing this little bit of balance where adoption is happening, and then trust may start going down as GPT kind of reaches its limitations, so as far as sort of specific applications and specific uses where where certain knowledge is required. So kind of seeing that and feeling that we felt like this was the time to develop something like this and then get it out there.
So one of the things a lot of us did early on when I think ChatGPT came out was, hey, make me a recipe. And early results weren't great. I think they've gotten a little bit better, but still oftentimes they seem a little bit funky. So maybe, I don't know if this is you, Lob, you could talk about kind of specialized versus general purpose AIs. You guys essentially, it feels like you're creating a specialized culinary centric AI with Colon AI. Can you talk about the need for that, the differences between someone just using ChatGPT and LLM versus, hey, this is built for culinary creation?
Yeah, so if you look at the basics of large language modeling, the technology behind ChatGPT, it is literally just trained to predict the next word from a sequence of words. And so there's no particular knowledge that's explicitly built in. And yet it's surprising that, these technologies are actually really good. I mean, they have these so-called emergent capabilities. They're able to do things beyond what they're trained for. And that's really, really compelling. They are this kind of general purpose technology that in the so-called zero shot regime, you don't train them to do anything in particular, but they're able to do a lot of things. And the way I think about it is they're kind of not experts at anything. They're kind of generalists trained on the whole internet. And because of that, they end up having what are called confabulations or hallucinations. Sometimes they'll generate things that don't make sense. But that are statistically possible, that read well, but maybe are not cookable in the culinary case. And if you look at theories of intelligence, actually, so there's this general factor of intelligence, G, this thing that's measured by IQ scores. But it's not, that's good generally for doing a lot of things. But then you should learn something about the topic you're working in. You should go to school, you should maybe get a PhD like I like to encourage students to do. And actually be very skilled and knowledgeable about a particular thing. And there's different ways of doing this. You can fine-tune large language models. You can draw on corpora. You can draw on structured data. You can do a bunch of different things. And so those are the styles of things that we're doing as we go forward, to actually draw on trusted knowledge on the nutrition side, on the flavor side, on the culinary technique side. And all of those things are coming together to really make a system that's not just something that reads reasonably well when you read it on the internet, but that you can actually cook, that's personalized for your flavor preferences, for your nutritional goals. So that's kind of where we're going to be, starting with that kind of general capability, but then moving beyond and being spiky in a particular direction.
Got it. So James, talk a little bit about Lav talked about how these specialized models are going to be training on all this different data sets. And as someone who went to this, was intimately involved with the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, a renowned organization that helps train the next generation of chefs. Do you think that the CIA and other culinary training institutions are going to arm up and coming chefs with AI as a tool to make them better or not? I'm just kind of curious how you see this being weaved into the traditional training of people who are working or aspiring to work in the culinary arts.
Yeah, I think it's, really, in my opinion, a fantastic tool for creativity and development and innovation. I think we all in any discipline, cooking or whatever creative field somebody may be in, always that challenge is to find a different perspective, to look at things a different way, to get out of sort of and I think in the kitchen it's even more common to kind of get out of what you typically do. You say tomato, basil, mozzarella balls, breaking away from those immediate connections, that you tend to draw. And yeah, I mean, obviously, going through cookbooks and, what traditionally we have, chefs have always done, you start, digging through all of the old cookbooks. But I mean, what we're doing now is we're talking about it, amassing, all of the knowledge, all of those, indexing all that information in cookbooks, and, digging even deeper into combinations that we may not even know, were possible or existed, or even really thought to give credibility to. But then you see the connections based on flavor compounds, based on these aromatic, molecules, in these different ingredients. You say, well, actually that's got a chance, let's go ahead and give it a shot. And it might actually be terrible, and that's okay too. That is part of the part of the process, of creativity and discovery. So I think, we always want to look at it as, and I think that's, should always be the focus, as looking at it as a collaborative tool, not something just to do your work for you.
Yeah. Well, are people who are traditional culinary creators, chefs in the world today, do you feel like they're still pretty skeptical of tools like AI? I feel like, creative people, artists oftentimes resist new tools. And there's also obviously a lot of conversation in the broader world about how AI is hoovering up all the data on the internet and not necessarily giving credit to like publishers, et cetera. So is there skepticism you're noticing among people who are currently working in the world of culinary?
To me, it's 50-50. I'd say it's really, split pretty well. I think there's a lot of people who are excited to adopt and implement, in those collaborative ways, to use it for innovation, and discovery. And I think, often, not exclusively, but a lot of the pushback does come from people who don't fully understand it, or go just kind of operate on that assumption of it's doing everything for you. Which of course, can be the case, and not a great way to do it. If, if you're working as a culinary consultant or a chef and say, write a menu for a modern French bistro, and then you go and publish that menu, not great. And that is the downside, and that is the risk of it. And I think that's the thing that people should be, but if you're developing a menu and you ask ChatGPT to give you a few, and, you pull a little bit of inspiration from that and other sources and experiences, then it's a great thing.
Go ahead, Love.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what James was saying, and I think there's a balance between tradition and novelty, that one has to strike as well. Like what Sara was saying, there's thousands of years of traditional culinary knowledge, and in fact, even like in terms of health aspects, right? So herbs and spices have been used in India and China and Mesoamerica and all, everywhere, as kind of this ethno-botanical knowledge of human health. And, drawing on that tradition and culture is important, because that connects people to their past and to their heritage. But then, you can put new spins on it. So, and I think that's really part of the power of AI. So you can, prompt it to be something that, I used to talk a lot with my late mother about cooking and culinary tradition. And so, but she used to also innovate and evolve. So, the AI can help with that in certain ways. I remember some years ago, we had done this Kenyan Brussels sprouts and gratin with some AI support. And she actually hated Brussels sprouts, but she actually liked this dish because, the cherries and the goat cheese and various other things kind of balance the flavor. So, there's different aspects to this that kind of come together as the humans and the AIs interact.
Yeah, there's a couple startups. One is actually a big company, but I don't know if you've heard of Cloud Chef. There's also an effort by Sony in Japan called Roku Shoku. Essentially, these are products or systems that essentially will copy and watch someone cook something, a chef, and understand how they're doing it, the different techniques, etc. So it goes beyond the recipe, which is oftentimes instructions on a paper, measurements, to actually kind of watching and being able to recreate it. And so this idea, Love and James, of capturing people's and chefs' culinary creativity for perpetuity. I know that I think the founder of Cloud Chef thought about his own grandma and like how he liked to cook with her and said, hey, maybe we could capture that magic. So it is kind of an interesting tool set to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think like the video-based knowledge extraction is advancing pretty quickly. Yeah, the multimodal kind of understanding. Although, like I should say, at least current AI is not very good for capturing olfactory and gustatory sensing. So I think the human expertise there is still pretty strong, together with the core like chemistry and psychophysics that goes into it.
We haven't quite created the true digital nose yet, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
We are starting to get some questions from the audience, so feel free if you have them to drop them in the chat. We'd like to get those while we're going. And by the way, thank you for everyone for joining today. Eric Carey asks, could AI be helpful in customizing recipes? For example, converting a meal to vegan by replacing ingredients and adjusting cooking time temp accordingly. It seems like that's like maybe a great use. What do you think, guys?
I think it's really, you know, one of the top uses. And, you know, I mean, I often say, I mean, I think, you know, really, and what I was just kind of about to say, put a pin on just in that previous conversation is, you know, I really always approach the use of AI as you know, for research, you know, for, you know, to kind of round out information, not as, you know, the assistant to, you know, do the work for me. You know, now kind of granted an application, you know, that would love to have, and I think we'll, you know, look at creating is when I'm writing a recipe in the kitchen, I know what I'm making. I have a list of ingredients. I fill in quantities next to those ingredients. Now, if I can just kind of hand over that ingredients and you know, the ingredients and quantities to an AI assistant and say, you know, write a soup recipe with this. And intuitively know kind of where to add it, and I don't have to sit at you know, for 30 minutes at my computer typing out all the instructions for the soup. Then I think that's, you know, fantastic. But I think, you know, personalization is you know, one of the great promises of AI. You know, to customize and personalize. So as Eric is asking right there, I think that's, you know, some of the best applications in you know, in towards recipes for AI. It's not, you know, always necessarily going to be something like Culinary AI that's a highly trained and specialized model with dedicated knowledge sources can do novel recipe generation, but also taking all of that information and knowing, yes, we need to turn this vegan. So, you know, and understanding, you know, first of all, what that means, because that's chatbots. Some of the worst recipes come out of asking it to make something that's gluten-free or not, you know, just not understanding really, you know, what ingredient categories even are. But okay, yeah, it needs to be vegan. So we're taking the cream out of this, but we need to replace that fat, that liquid, and the smooth mouthfeel that the cream was going to provide in that. And as a chef, obviously that's intuitive to me, and I kind of, you know the steps to take. But for the average person, obviously, you know, they're not going to have that. So I think that's really a fabulous application of AI in recipe development.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the power of the AI is it can be a little bit more sophisticated than single ingredient substitution. Because, you know, some people will put in bananas for eggs in the cookies, and, you know, I mean, that works, but, you know, it changes the flavor profile. So it's a more sophisticated kind of, not a single ingredient substitution, but, you know, adjusting everything all together, which is something that's difficult for people.
And that's how ChatGPT winds up giving you a vegan omelet with mashed bananas. Because it thinks that bananas are a great substitute for eggs.
I know one of the things you guys have emphasized for Culinary AI when it comes to personalization is doing it around health and nutrition and wellness. I feel like there's been that's really a strong intersection. I'm seeing this idea of like intersecting with culinary. A lot of it is focused on how we can customize around people to get better health outcomes. And so can you talk about some of your thinking there and maybe how you guys are thinking to say, hey, let's weave in some components or some strengths into this thing that allow people to kind of build around their own personalized nutrition plan?
Yeah, I mean, as we know, just in general, just health outcomes in the U.S. are abysmal, and we have to do things to make them better. And, you know, again, kind of revisiting what we just said there. I mean, personalization, that's the key. That's the key to actually, you know, sticking with something. I mean, it's, you know, great to visit your doctor and your doctor tells you, you know, what, you know, kind of what what direction you need to be going with your diet, and maybe you get a little pamphlet or a handout with a couple good recipes, or you get a handout with 4 recipes and you actually like one of them, and then it gets old, and then you fall back to old habits, and then you jump on the internet and start Googling, and you end up with a lot of personal blogs that are telling you this is fitting what you're supposed to be doing, or they're sharing what worked for them. That had no guarantee that's what's going to work for you. If you can work with a system that actually understands your flavor preferences, because that can be learned, and then start customizing or even developing recipes based on your specific flavor preferences that also meet your given nutritional needs, be that coming from IDC-10 codes or just a general kind of overview of, hey, I'm a 6'3", 224 president of the United States and need to remain cognitively sharp. And this is how I need to eat to this is what you need to eat to be able to do that. Whatever. I mean, so you can kind of put in, like I said, you can put in medical diagnosis, you can put in a general, and design, and have a meal plan laid out for you.
Yep, and we're starting to work with a health system, like their innovation team. So some of this can be even automated. So it's not that the patient has to enter all of this in, but it can be extracted directly from their electronic health records. So it's almost kind of automatic in the background, and that just makes it easier for everyone. And like James was saying, I mean, you need variety and kind of ease, because that's what leads to sticking to diets. Because if you just have those 4 things on that photocopied handout that's been around for 30 years, I mean, it's unlikely you're going to stick with it. So, the variety, the ease, the flavor, I mean, all of it comes together for health.
There are a number of tools and companies building software tools that use AI to help you better understand what you're putting in your body. One of the companies we've talked a bit about is January AI, where they'll basically take a snapshot of your food and then they'll predict the impact on your blood sugar of what you're about to eat or what you just took a picture of. I feel like there's a greater recognition across the U.S. and across the world that food is part of your health outcomes. Lav, I'd be curious about like how you see like maybe AI factoring in as becoming almost like a personalized nutrition coach, because there's not enough people in the world to do that. People can't afford it. It's out of reach for most people, but AI could maybe substitute. Is this something that is going to become more and more important over time?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, AI is a good way to, extend expertise, and, like kind of coaching and kind of just providing inputs of various kinds. So, I mean, I think that's a great application. Again, like you can think of yourself as your own kind of body's operator. And like the way people are often thinking about AI is it can augment people who operate, wastewater treatment plants or manufacturing facilities or, anything. And now you're taking it rather than on the external side, on the internal side. And so, I mean, I think it's exactly the same. It's kind of like that co-pilot coach that can help you optimize yourself in a certain way.
Speaking of using AI to help us in terms of our health outcomes, Chef Kelly Anderson says she's used a custom GPT to upload all of her aging mother's blood work, her known injuries and ailments, arthritis, etc. And she fine-tuned it, and she came out with a comprehensive and personalized meal plan, and her mother's using it daily. So that's an interesting, I think, early adopter type of application. Sandy Markle wants to know, how do you plan to establish trust in the reliability of recipes? One recipe fail can really co-platform it. I know that some of us had some bad outcomes from using ChatGPT early on. If you have a dedicated food-centric AI and it has a bad outcome, how do you kind of protect against that? How do you build trust?
So, I mean, that's really in the construction of what we're developing with Culinary AI, and Lav can certainly speak to it better than me. But I mean, we're working through some systems, and don't want to get too many specifics, but about proofs through the generation process.
Yeah. Don't want to give away too much of our secret sauce at the moment, but I mean, there's the technological aspect of trust, but there's also the human aspect, and I think that's where the fact that we've been working in this area for a long time helps. James has been a chef for I actually don't know how long, but quite a while.
20 plus.
Yep, and I've been working in AI for a long time as well. So this is something that is core to who we are, and so there's kind of that human level of trust that augments the technological aspects that we're building.
Tiffany McCord brings up an interesting point. She asks, is Culinary AI geared for all skill levels or mostly trained chefs? That's that kind of delicate balance. How do you build a product that works? Because cooking can be up to like the James level, like Master Chef, down to like, just someone who's basically could cobble a meal together, can hardly cobble a meal together. So is it for all and in between, or is it kind of for a specific skill set?
Yeah, I mean, really, really meant for everybody, and we plan to kind of be able to, toggle from, beginner to novice to, expert, and with as with any machine learning system, I mean, it'll start to get to know you, and kind of operate at the level you're looking for. Some of the things that we're looking at as we're building all of this base functionality. There's really a lot of different ways to apply that base functionality, and it can be a simple meal plan and 30-minute recipes for weekday meals that all generate with a link to a digital shopping cart that lets you order those groceries and have them delivered right to you. And almost kind of basically a customized HelloFresh or Blue Apron, or whatever it may be. Of course, one of the things we want to do with that too is maximize utilization. I know there's a lot of waste issues with some of those meal plan, food services like that deliver, where we can maximize utilization. But then also for the professional chef, for that big food nerd who likes to study the flavor matrix and things like that. And I can say food nerd because I'm one of those myself. You can kind of pull back the basic recipe function and you get into all of the underlying science that's happening there. So yeah, I mean, we definitely see it as a tool for everyone.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, we're aiming to, of course, impact direct consumers, but I mean, we are also, largely aiming to go through health systems and wellness programs and things like that. So kind of more of this B2B2C approach. And so depending on which program you're accessing the technology, I think that would already kind of help shape the particulars of the interface and the particulars of what's being generated, so it's appropriate for that audience.
I always forget I can put questions on the screen. I'm going to do that now. So Ashlyn has a good question. She says she appreciated the earlier mention of preserving cultural heritage and tradition. What other key challenges are front of mind with culinary AI? And I imagine when she says culinary AI, just more broadly, what, if anything, risks being left behind or requires more user awareness? Real quick, one of the reasons we're going to the Vatican and having this workshop is like one of the things you worry about with AI systems, if it's a certain demographic of people creating those AIs, there could be biases, for example. So I imagine bias is one of the things you have to guard against a lot. That's probably a thing you think about a lot. What are some of the other things that you have to worry about and think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is with respect to sustainability. So like if you ask a ChatGPT or things like cost, right, you could end up with, like truffles and I don't know what, as the suggested ingredients. There's no obvious way to impose cost constraints or ingredient availability constraints or any of these kinds of things. And so that's one of the dimensions that we're thinking about quite a bit. If you take ingredients like, say, algae protein, it's super healthy. It requires almost no energy or water or land to grow. And yet no one really eats it because it doesn't taste all that great. So, you could kind of help create an ecosystem where these ingredients like algae, just to take an example, would become more and more prominent. So that would have kind of both health and climate impacts very directly through the AI. So that would be kind of another example. And broadly speaking, like these questions of accessibility that you kind of alluded to, Michael, I think those are very central to how we want to do things. Healthy eating shouldn't just be, the thing for the rich, right? I mean, it's for everyone. Whether you're in a food desert or you're in, growing your own herb garden. I mean, I think there's possibilities in all of those settings.
And I think, culinary tradition is something that we don't want to lose either. And I think that's, probably a little bit what Ashlyn was alluding to. And I think, like Eric asked, we, just because it's an AI generated recipe doesn't mean it has to be 100% novel, completely original, never, so, taking some of those applications, like Eric said, and say, yeah, I want chicken parm, but this is my diet that it has to, fit within, and here's how we can, kind of customize to that. That might be not the best example, because that was a little bit more challenging, but we don't have to completely change, the dishes or the food that we eat, just the way that food, is prepared,
To your point, Lob, I think you mentioned about sustainability, and I remember a quote from Jasmine Hume, the founder of a company that basically does novel food creation, looking at different food molecules and combinations of plant-based food molecules. His company's called Shiru, but she also used to work with one of the kind of early founders, I think it was Eat Just, and basically, it took them 3 years in the lab to come up with some of these recipes for those early plant-based alternative proteins. And now she thinks they could do it essentially with 3 weeks, aided by AI. So the ability to use AI to just look for novel combinations. Ultimately, you have to test out in a wet lab, for example, and actually taste it. But just to kind of look through that and process through data, it's just orders of magnitude faster, which I think is important if we're talking about, hey, we need to get to more sustainable, better tasting food solutions. AI could be a real strong tool to kind of weave through and understand like what some of those combinations could be.
Yeah, for sure.
Sandy asks a little bit about the content side. Sandy Markle, she says, how can content creators in food embrace the potential of AI and not feel threatened by, perhaps even support and join the initiatives of companies like Culinary AI? So how can they support it? How can they use it? How can they support you guys?
Yeah, well, I think, just the sort of the general about, content creators and embrace the potential of AI. I think, you look at that as a collaborative tool that can augment, what you're already doing. So, not to fully replace. I mean, I think, probably all of us get a little bit disheartened about our social media feeds that we probably spend too much time on anyway, but they're just, getting overrun with AI generated content. But, I've also seen like really creative ways where, where it is used, to augment or help tell different parts of the story. So I think that's, one way of looking at it. Love, I know you had something there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think content creators, as long as they're authentic, I mean, I think that's where their value comes from. And if you're just text prompting a LLM to generate something that, you have very little creative control over, I think that just kind of, it is what it is. What we're aiming for is to, give a little bit more creative control to individuals and, preserving their authenticity. And so I think it can, like James is saying, bring value to content creators. On the flip side, there's often this fear that, AIs are going to steal and scrape everything from everyone. And I think as we go forward, our aim is to be respectful of creators as much as we can. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
James, I followed how big food chains and even kind of more kind of higher end restaurants are using AI. There's certainly no shortage of headlines around like the Yum Brands of the world trying to use AI for things like recreating the customer drive-through experience. Like the person you're talking to at the drive-through might not actually be a person, might be an AI. I've thought about how AI could give new employees superpowers so they could basically become wine sommeliers without actually having to spend 10 years learning about wine. What are some ways you think you could see AI being integrated into the restaurant dining experience? Is there ways in which you can make the experience better for consumers, better for the chef, better for everyone overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit on what I think are the big ones. Even I think a good AI, a well-trained AI wine recommender, sommelier, can be a great thing. But I would also hate to lose that amazing conversation you have that that and maybe that gets transmitted in text, but it's certainly not the same to have someone stand by your table and talk to you about the great grandfather who first planted these vines in this spot, and then the generations who have done it. But and at the same time, that's not the appropriate experience for every every time you dine out either. So if I think I think really kind of keeping that focus on AI applications that are venue appropriate, and specific, I think, I think are a big piece. Yeah, I mean, anytime you're looking at organizing vast amounts of information, or being able to deploy your human resources, and take away some of their menial tasks, saying yes, cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke, dedicating those man hours to someone just to do that. And if those kind of things can be automated, then we can redeploy that human capital somewhere else, to personalize the face-to-face interaction, to make those kind of interactions better. I think that's really where the focus should be.
Yeah, it's like there's all sorts of eating occasions in our lives. Like there's just the quick fuel up that you do for lunch in between meetings, which you don't necessarily need like a sommelier for that. But when I do think over time, people are going to crave those high-end dining experiences that are very human-centered, or we have that chef auteur, you have the sommelier, and that probably never goes away because people are going to crave that more and more, even as the world becomes more digitized.
Absolutely.
If you guys have more questions for James or Lav, feel free to drop them in the chat. James, I remember in our prep call, or Lav, we were talking in our prep call about food security and how AI made it help at times help in the supply chain, guarding against supply chain disruption or scarcity. Can you talk about how you think maybe AI can help in those regards?
Yeah. So when I was thinking a lot about national security, food security is one of those very critical infrastructures and critical sectors, perhaps only second to water and maybe energy. So, it's very critical. And one of the things that you can do on the culinary and recipe side is actually adapt your formulations and your recipes based on what's available when. We saw this during the pandemic. There might have been shortages of strawberries, or actually not because of the strawberries, but because of the clam boxes. I mean, there was a shortage of those rather than the strawberries themselves. Things like that. So if you can adjust. So we were talking about like the vegan adjustment of recipes, but you can also do like a shortage of strawberries adjustment to recipes in the same way. And keep up the nutrition, keep up the flavor in the same ways, and you just make the whole system much more robust. And then there's also like on the supply chain itself, often the source of like recalls for food safety is because it's a very heavy-handed thing that's done. You recall like all the mushrooms in the country and that's because you're not tracing things at a very specific level, and you're not able to do kind of AI-based, very like refined recalls or tracking of food safety. So there's a lot of these elements throughout the system, whether it's literally the supply chain or at the end stage of recipes, or even on the food waste side. You can optimize waste treatment to produce more energy, like produce biogas and various other things. So throughout the whole food pipeline, there's possibilities for AI, which are exciting, which can make our society much more resilient.
So as you guys think about AI and food, what are you most excited about? It's kind of wrapping things up. When you think about the future, you think about this intersection. If you both could kind of answer this, what do you see as like the biggest opportunity, maybe the biggest risk for how AI can impact food? I'll start with you, James.
Yeah, I think almost two phase. I mean, for me, it's personally just in my own applications, immediate applications. It's the innovation. What we can learn and how we can create and develop using AI is super exciting. And then looking at kind of what we're doing and what we're building with Culinary, it's really about providing information. There's an educational element to it. But where you can wrap up a personal shopper, a private chef, a nutritionist, a doctor, or a medical professional, kind of all into one simple interface, that as we know, kind of the luxury of being able to eat a personalized, healthy diet is something that's kind of just for rich people. And to democratize that information and that ability, and provide it to people who are trying to feed themselves at any income level, and share that information, I think is most exciting.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I completely agree with James. And then I think there's this other aspect of it, which is just kind of enhancing human flourishing at a broad level. So, we're trying to enhance human kind of agency. So, letting people be who they are, and, in a healthy, like promoting their own health in the ways they want to, giving them the tools to do that. And, there's this long tradition of thinking about food as medicine. Like people often don't like medicine, right? And so, if you can make food that's flavorful, that's enjoyable, that, leads to psychological flourishing while also being kind of physically healthy. I think that's the real aim for what we're doing, kind of at this very broadest of levels.
That's great. I think about algorithmic kind of driving a behavior when I think about, like, for example, when I use Google Maps a lot because I don't have a great sense of direction, but oftentimes I'll find Google Maps is taking me down a certain path that they're sending everyone else on. So I feel like, oh, this street's crowded because Google Maps told everyone to go down the street. So when I think about like AI and algorithms driving behavior, one of the things I worry about a little bit is like, okay, everyone trying to cook the same recipe. I think social media happens to a certain extent. It happens to a certain extent with social media. But there's a talk in agriculture and food about, this idea of monocrops and like kind of we're lacking diversity. Can AI be smart enough to guard against kind of the push towards like monocrops and really encourage things like agriculture-based diversity? Can that be built into the systems, Lav?
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't be the one to speak because I'm from Central Illinois where we grow corn and soybeans, but I think that's definitely the case. Personalization by its nature leads to diversity, and in fact, variety, again, to quote an old saying, or it's the spice of life. And that's really true in the culinary setting. People often fall into this pattern of they only have like 6 things that they cook and they're just in rotation. And, you get sick of it. You start deviating, you eat the chips and the Doritos you have lying around, etc. So, variety actually is core to kind of this diet, following diets and so on. So, I think diversity is kind of the core to what we're trying to do. So, that's kind of my sense of it.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of folks who work on the NASA astronaut space food systems, and like one of the things they really have to work on is diversity because you don't have that much food to eat up there, and the astronauts get tired of eating the same thing. So that's why they're working on how do we grow mushrooms in space? How do we grow fresh greens in space? We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Tiffany McClure just dropped a question. Should I bother teaching my kids to cook, or will cooking skills go the way of teaching them cursive writing? I feel like my cursive is completely atrophied. I feel like is cooking the same way, or no? We won't have.
No. I don't think so. And I think I go back to when we were doing kind of our first press around Chef Watson, and when it first came out, and at that time I could confidently say that Chef Watson still doesn't know how to flip an omelet, and despite the fact that we're getting there, and there are some robots and some systems that are now flipping omelets. I don't know. I shouldn't say never. In the foreseeable future, I don't think we're going to be the Jetsons where you just scroll to the photo of the food you want, hit the button, and 10-15 minutes later it drops out of a slot. That's kind of Culinary AI is built around the experience of cooking still, and equipping people with all the tools that they need to cook healthy food for themselves, and not that it has to be a multi-hour investment daily. That can be very quick and they can be very simple. And look, for me at home as a chef, I cook in a way that I don't have to do it every single day. That we look to, hey, we're going to prepare all of these things on today, and then that'll get us covered for the next 2 days, 3 days, whatever it may be. So no, Tiffany, I hope that cooking skills never, ever go away.
I just dropped your post, James, from your Substack introducing Culinary AI. People want to play with this thing. they want to start using Culinary, can you talk a little bit about how they can do that?
Yeah, it's not. There's nothing public facing yet. We are still building. Sorry, see the Blue
That's
Angels.
okay.
Blue Angels are passing by right now. Welcome to Pensacola, Florida. It's a beautiful place. Yeah, so nothing public facing. Currently with Culinary, we are going to be through that Substack, kind of sharing the journey, talking about as we develop. And I think that'll be ground zero for when there are tools that can be interacted with.
And if there are people in the world of food, CPG, restaurants that want to get in touch with you to maybe work with you guys, how's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there should be contact through the Substack, but I think
Okay.
LinkedIn for both of us, on Instagram. Always happy to connect and hear from folks who are living in this world and creating as well.
Yep, and then
Awesome.
also like health systems and well-being programs and so on. I mean, that's the other avenue that we think is very important.
Yeah, corporate wellness, health systems, really, at all levels.
Yep. Well, this has been great. James, I've been following your work for some time, and I always appreciate your insights on what you're doing. I love this combination of this two different superpowers. James, you as a cook and a chef, and then Lob, you as an respected AI scientist, working with the likes of the White House, etc. This is just a super combination. I'm expecting big things from Culinary and following the journey. So thank you for spending time with us today. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael.
Yep,
Of
thanks.
course.
And thanks to everyone who tuned in. We appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed.
Yeah, it's been great.